So this is a week in my life as a PhD student, but this is a special one because I'll be doing a what I read in a week as a PhD student at Brown University. If you don't know, if this is your first time here on my channel, my name is Georga-Kay. I am a first year history PhD student at Brown University. I have like 4 more weeks to the end of the semester, and I vlog my life and talk about grad school and lifestyle content. So if you're interested, you should consider subscribing. But today's gonna be good because I'm gonna start taking you guys along for what I read in a week. I have a few books, a few articles. I'll be showing you like my process of getting through them, and I'll also just be talking about what I find interesting. So yeah, so let's get into it. Okay, so this is what I'm currently reading. I've actually read Slavery in the University before when I was doing my senior thesis, but I have to read it again for my independent study. It's a part of like my labor and university series. So this one I'll probably just like skim through it again to see if I see anything new, if anything sticks out to me. But honestly, it's a really interesting read if anyone wants to learn about sort of like the history of slavery at U.S. universities. And it mentions like some prominent colleges, Harvard and like all the Ivies and all of that stuff. So definitely recommend this book, but I have a few more pages to go and I'm just skimming it again. So the next book that I have to read this week, I have about 4 books to read, and yesterday I went ahead and looked at my syllabus for Africana. I have 4 articles to read for that one. Each are about like 20 to 25 pages. I think one might be like 30 pages. But yeah, this week is a heavy reading week for me because I typically don't have that many articles and this many books to do, but it's winding down for the end of the semester, so it's just like you gotta do what you gotta do, and so I'll be reading a whole lot. But this is The Black Worker by Eric Arnson. I don't know. Have not started reading this one yet, but I've heard great things. It's really talking about race, labor, and civil rights since emancipation, which, if you don't know, is the theme of my independent study. I'm looking at Black labor and Providence post-emancipation, so I'm hoping that I can find some good things in this. I think I might wait to read this one later because I have 2 classes today, so I probably won't get to read as much. I think tomorrow, which is Wednesday, and Thursday is when I'll get to read most of these books. So today I'll just skim Slavery in the University because I don't have that much. Okay, so it's been a while since I filmed the last clip for this vlog. To be honest, life got so crazy. When I tell you, that was like, I started the reading vlog for this like right before finals, and then finals kind of just took over my life. I did end up finishing reading the books, but I did not talk about them. I did not talk about my reading sort of like load and any of my thoughts on the books. So I figured I will do that to end out the segment now. So these are the books that I ended up reading for my independent study, and I got through all of them. It did take me a little bit longer than I usually would, just because my independent study is a little bit more flexible. I ended up having to read a ton of articles for my other classes, and so I prioritized getting that done, and then I got back to these books. But I want to answer some questions that I get a lot because I do share about like what I read in a week on TikTok. So if you want to see more of this side of like content in real life, you can follow me on TikTok. It is the same username as my YouTube username. But some of the common questions that I get is how many books do I actually read in a week as a history PhD student? And I will say I end up reading about 2 to 3 books, big, 2 to 3 books like this per week, and then I'll have like a handful of articles, maybe like 2 to 3, sometimes more than that, sometimes like 4 or 5, depending on the length of the articles. Also, people ask, how do I like retain the information in these books that I'm reading? A lot of it has to do with my note-taking style. So no, I do not read all of these books cover to cover. That's not the point. Like, it's not really for me to sort of like read every single word in the book, but more so it's for me to understand what sort of contribution is the book is making. So for like a history major, what I end up doing, there's my dog Harley, but as a history major, what I end up doing a lot is I have a outline for all the books that I read, and I basically think about a summary of the book. What are the main arguments and what contribution is it making within a specific subfield? And then for these books is labor history, so what contribution is it making to labor history? And then I'll write quotes that I think really stick out to me, like things that I might want to use in my future work. And then I'll also think about sources and methodologies. So like, what kind of sources are they using? Are they using archival sources? Are they using oral histories, photographs, things like that? That sort of think about how they're constructing their argument. So once I go through and I can answer all of those questions within my outline, I move on. I will say it probably takes me about like, on average, 5 to 6 hours with each book at minimum. So because being a PhD student is my full-time job, I spend all day doing this, where I'll read a book within a day and just try to get as much from it as I can, and then I'll move on. And if you are an incoming PhD student and that's the reason why you're watching this video, I would recommend doing that, because when I just started my PhD program, I would be spending so much time with books. Like, I'd be spending days. And if you know anything about the pace of like having to write papers and having to come up with like discussion points, you do not have days with a book. So I've gotten much better at just like getting what I need from my outline and then moving on to my other books, because we have a lot to read. And so like, honestly, my outline saves me, because I can go back and look back and be like, oh, this is how the author constructed their argument, this is how they're positioning themselves, and it sort of helps with like that brain power. And I do all my note taking on Google Docs. I know a lot of people use like Evernote and other stuff like that, but I'm just a little bit more familiar with Google Docs, so that's what I still use. Okay, so now I wanted to talk about actually the books that I read. So I just wanted to get out of the way and answer some questions that I had that I figure you guys would have about the reading process as a PhD student. If you have any more specific questions, definitely leave them below and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. But now for the actual books that I read on labor history, I want to do this more on my channel, which is like just talk about the books I'm reading and my thoughts on them. Because there's so many, I'm not going to talk about every single one, but I'm going to talk about the ones that I particularly enjoyed. Actually, where is this book? Let me grab it. So in terms of like, if you're trying to learn about Black labor, I would highly recommend these two. The Black Worker. This is a really, really good book. I really enjoyed this. I think it's really informational. I really enjoyed this though for like the writing. Like this is by Cantor. Black Labor in America. Like, they had some really good quotes that I ended up using in my independent study in this one. So if you're trying to like just get an introduction into Black labor, I think Black Labor in America is a good one. And then if you don't know, I do some critical university studies work as well, because I look at Black laborers on universities, on college campuses in the 20th century. And so I read a lot about Black labor on college campuses, specifically thinking about enslaved Black labor. And so this one I feel like is really common, but it's the Slavery and the University book. And it talks about a lot of these elite colleges and how they were implicated in slavery, and how they not only sold enslaved people to sort of like stave off financial ruin, but also at times hired enslaved workers, or a lot of their alumni and students were also large slave owners. So really, really fascinating book, and I think it's a good read, and it has contributions from a bunch of different contributors. So it's also like something where you're getting multiple perspectives and voices. And then this one, I think this one took me a little bit longer to get into. It's Ebony and Ivy, but it's so fascinating, so interesting. It's specifically talking about like the Ivy League colleges and how Ivy League colleges, Ivy League universities like Brown, like Harvard, like Yale, and their role in slavery and sort of like their black laborers in the I guess colonial era. And so I feel like if you're really interested in specifically, like if you're a person who goes to Ivy League school, or if you're just interested in how Ivy specifically, as some of the oldest institutions in the nation, sort of set a precedent for this stuff, this book is a really good book to read for that. So I highly recommend that. It is a little bit more dense than some of these other books, especially since the text isn't that small. But yeah, I just remember that it took me a while to get into, but once I started to like get the information up from it, I was like, this is a really, really good book if someone's also trying to learn about slavery in American universities. And then I have a book that I actually don't physically have because I read it online, but I highly want to recommend it to you guys if you're also learning about black labor. Is Clinging to Mammy is a really, really good book that I read for this independent study, and it's talking about sort of like the construction of the Mammy figure and its political uses in the late 19th, early 20th century. And if you are at all like familiar with the Mammy stereotype, then I would recommend that book because it opened my eyes to sort of like, I've always just thought of the Mammy figure as a function of labor because black women performed this sort of reproductive labor for white families, but a lot of it had to do with like the sexual politics of the Jim Crow era and the antebellum era. So highly recommend Clinging to Mammy. I will maybe do a book review later, and Harley is still going off. Yeah, I wanted to end this video here just talking about my reading process, talking about some of my thoughts on the books that I read, and I'll do more of these what I read in a week videos because I really enjoyed them. I'm sorry that this one didn't have as much continuity as I would have liked, but finals took it out of your girl. But at least I am officially done with my first year, and so yeah, second year we'll have a lot more reading content. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.